The Assaulted is a work of historical fiction whose main storyline occurs from April to November of 2018. The Assaulted is about mass shootings that have occurred in the United States since Columbine. Every shooting included in this work has been meticulously researched, and its events are presented as honestly and accurately as possible in order to pay homage to the victims and their families. Any and all persons specifically mentioned in this work are presented in the best possible light. At no time is it my intention to anger, hurt, or defame anyone other than the actual shooters of the included events. These individuals can rot in hell for all I care. If I have offended anyone else, my sincere apologies. And now, The Assaulted.
Somehow this has become routine. The reporting is routine. My response here at this podium ends up being routine. The conversation in the aftermath of it, we've become numb to this. We talked about this after Columbine and Blacksburg, after Tucson, after Newtown, after Aurora, after Charlestown. It cannot be this easy for somebody who wants to inflict harm on other people to get his or her hands on a gun.
The Assaulted. Prologue. Columbine, Colorado. It became real on April 21st, 1999. A student or students of a high school in Colorado whose existence was taking up hours on every major network, whose name and the names of murdered friends and a faculty member would be on the front pages of newspapers all over the world, were already deep into what had become an all-night project to honor that faculty member, a coach, and more importantly, at least in their minds, a computer teacher, a man who had always made them feel as though they were gifted, not different. It began as a tribute to him. As the night progressed and the realization struck that this sadness, this ache, this feeling of nightmarish horror would only subside with time, it went from a tribute page to something far more. It became a place for people to go and talk with those who understood, to listen to those who needed to scream, to rage, to let their deepest emotions go. It was only for survivors, both of physical and mental wounds, and loved ones. And unfortunately, it grew. Those who were invited would receive a card. Initially, the hosts or hosts bought them from a local drugstore. Subsequently, as it grew and donations from those who knew reached the hosts, special cards were printed. However, the invitation was always handwritten. The recipients always meticulously researched, the words inside honest and sincere. Whatever pain the survivor or loved one was feeling was expressed in words that made them know that whoever wrote this note had also been into that very dark place, and that there was help if they wanted it. There would always be a request not to share the contents of the card. There would be assurances that everyone associated with their tragedy would receive the same card, would have the same opportunity to grieve with those who had walked the same path as them. And those who received these cards quickly found out that everyone who had been touched by tragedy had received one of their own. It was hidden well. It always took at least 3 different usernames and just as many passwords to find it. It was moved often and effectively. Due to the circle of suffering becoming wider over time, several computer-savvy people besides the original hosts had a hand in keeping it secure, for they had needed it as well, and it had been there. It remained hidden for over 25 years. The men, women, and children who went there understood its almost religious nature. It was only for those who had suffered a loss due to a mass shooting. Those who had to deal with the indescribable searing in your brain of losing a loved one, or of witnessing people they knew being ripped apart by a bullet, or feeling the fire inside them, not being able to scream or move, knowing there might be another bullet with their name on it. Those who could never move themselves away from the terror, for they had woken up in a hospital and been told that because of some deranged monster, they could no longer walk, or see, or hear, or talk, or hold, or think clearly. This could not be for anybody else but them. It had started as a small site to honor a dead teacher. It had grown to well over 30,000 members, every single member wishing they were not. This huge group always wishing and praying that no one else would join them. Yet, when it happened, and it always happened, the last member, as they were called on site, would always hear from other members about the love, friendship, and openness of this group. When they most needed support, most needed a proverbial shoulder to cry on, someone was always there to help them. When they wanted to rage, curse God, and scream that no one was doing anything, fuck the government, fuck the NRA, that's where they went. People would listen. People would care. People would cry. The site was www.theassaulted.com. It was always referred to by members as the site. Everyone on the site called themselves the Assaulted. Chapter 1. Waffle House, Antioch, Tennessee, April 22nd, 2018. Raymond J. Wilson, known to all as Ray, loved his wife. He was crazy about her. She was the love of his life. Marion, my librarian, he would sing Robert Preston style, had entered his life at a relatively late age. Both married previously, both divorced. They'd met at one of the last networking events he would ever attend, a business after hours at a local Gainesville, Virginia company, 40 miles outside his front rural farm. They started chatting because they realized they were the only people at the event that each other was interested in. She was the executive director of a national nonprofit that subsidized teachers and tutors to teach reading to disadvantaged children. A former library director, Marion the librarian, who loved her job and everything that went with it, including travel, and the seeking of folks with the big bucks, as she liked to say. One reason she had been interested in Ray? Everyone in Northern Virginia knew Ray had big bucks. Luckily, this upcoming trip was to be the last without him. After 10 years of marriage and countless lonely plane flights, Marion and Ray were going to be traveling together. He had just retired as a commercial real estate broker, had made millions, and couldn't think of anything he'd rather do than wandering around cities and towns while Marion, quote, keeps me in the lifestyle I've gotten accustomed to. This last trip was to take her into Tennessee, the Nashville area. She'd be staying at the Holiday Inn Express and Suites. She was a member of their rewards club. Ray would tell friends that she's got so many points we could stay at Holiday Inns free for the rest of our lives. April 16th to April 23rd. Then they'd head to San Diego and the Hotel del Coronado. She didn't know, but he had booked the Victorian suite, reserved a romantic dinner on their balcony, plus arranged all the hotel shit she likes to do. Whenever she was away, they had a ritual. When she woke up, she'd FaceTime him. When you're at your prettiest. He always looked like hell in the morning. She'd FaceTime him at lunchtime to make sure you're eating healthy. He was a sweetaholic. She'd FaceTime him at night. It made them both get to sleep easier. One other time, if either was having trouble sleeping, one would FaceTime the other and chat with the insomniac until he or she felt tired. It might be 5 minutes or an hour, but they'd hang in, knowing how tough it was to sleep without the other. That's the schedule they kept on that Nashville trip. Morning, noon, night FaceTime with no middle-of-the-night calls until Sunday morning, April 22nd. Ray heard the familiar buzz. Hey, babe. What time is it? Hi, baby. I couldn't sleep. I can see that. Where are you? I saw a Waffle House across the street. Just having a hot chocolate, trying to figure if I should be bad and have a waffle. He looked at the time. 4:15 his, 3:15 hers. A waffle at 3:15? Think you'll be able to fit in your thong next weekend? Giggle. Sweetie, no one in this world wants to see me in a thong, especially that Hotel Del bunch. I do. Smile. And that's why I love you so. Think I'll get back to the room. Love you too, Marion the librarian. Glad I could help. Mwah. Mwah. She was gone. He smiled, went right back to sleep. The phone rang again at 5 a.m. At first he smiled. She's calling me back. Then he realized the phone was ringing, not buzzing. Babe? Serious, professional voice. Is this Raymond J. Wilson, married to Marion F. Wilson? A nervous feeling suddenly gripped Ray's stomach. Yes, this is Ray Wilson. He would remember the following for the rest of his life. I'm Detective Watson, Nashville Police. Mr. Wilson, your wife was involved in a shooting at the Waffle House in Antioch this morning. That's impossible, he yelled. I spoke to Marion at 3:15. Mr. Wilson, she was headed back to her room. She told me so. Mr. Wilson, she was headed out when someone walked in carrying an AR-15 automatic. He killed 3 people, shot your wife several times. She was transported to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. She's in extremely critical condition. We suggest... Those are the last words Ray Wilson heard. He threw on jeans, t-shirt, jacket, ran out to his car, careened out the driveway, calling Dulles Airport for the first available flight to Nashville. American Airlines, 5:12 a.m. While driving at over 100 miles per hour, he called the airlines. After explaining the situation in as calm a voice as he could muster, they agreed to hold the plane until he arrived, which ended up being about 5:20. While boarding, he called Detective Watson, gave him the particulars, and asked him to have a police cruiser meet him at the plane. It was a 24-hour, 2-hour flight. The words, extremely critical, screamed in his head. American Airlines upgraded him to first class. The staff was solicitous, but he needed nothing other than to see Marion, sitting up in bed, smiling at him, saying, I knew I shouldn't have woken you up. Then his rational self reappeared, the self that had earned and kept over $20 million in an erratic D.C. commercial market. Ray Wilson always prepared for every contingency, in business or his personal life. So he started preparing for the worst of all contingencies. He woke up Maddox Funeral Home's director in downtown Front Royal and started efforts there. He woke up several friends in Front Royal town government for assurances that what he wanted to do would not be a problem. He woke up his old friend Kim Jones and asked her if she'd be able to sing a particular song. He had loved her voice for over 30 years. Through sobs, she said yes. The plane landed, parked in a spot away from the terminal, where several police cruisers, lights flashing, waited. The attendants came to his seat. Mr. Wilson, the Nashville police are waiting to take you to your wife. Thank you for your kindness. You're welcome. God bless you. Both flight attendants had tears in their eyes. Walking down the exit steps, he saw a group of uniformed and plainclothes officers waiting. The one in front was tall, ruggedly built, plainclothes. His face said what Ray wanted to know. Mr. Wilson, I'm Detective Watson. We spoke on the phone. I'm sorry to... Detective, please don't say any more. I know. Please take me to my wife. They got to the medical center as fast as a 5-car caravan could get there. At one point, Ray apologized to Watson for being so abrupt. He needed to see, not hear. The detective understood. Everyone reacted differently, but ultimately, everybody acted the same. Ray was led to a viewing room off the morgue. He gently but firmly stated that he needed to be there, to see and touch her, to know that it was done, over. They took him inside. It was done. It was over. The AR-15 bullets had stitched an almost straight line across her lower rib cage. Still wearing clothing he'd seen just a few short hours before. He stood, staring at her. Dates, walks, vacations, laughs, love, flying through his head. Where they had been, where they were going. It seemed like just a minute. Mr. Wilson? Detective? I'm sorry they've allowed you an hour in here, but they need the room. The staff informed me a Maddox Funeral Home has already made arrangements. You'll be flying out on American Airlines at 10:38 to Dulles. With Marion? Yes, sir. With Marion. I'm sorry, we got to get out of here. I understand. Thanks for your patience. Instead of coffee at the farm, underneath his huge, scraggly oak tree, sitting on one of the matching chairs he'd made for them, he was sitting in a hospital cafeteria mindlessly drinking cup after cup, seeing the bullet holes in his wife's body, not being able to forget it, to shake it. He didn't feel the taps, hear the voice, for at least a minute. Mr. Wilson? Mr. Wilson. Startled, he jumped, then replied, Oh. Yes, detective. They're ready to head to the airport. Ray climbed into the detective's car, now noticing a hearse behind them. Detective, do you mind if I ride with my wife? Fine, I'll wait until the driver flashes his lights at me. Ray went back to the hearse. They arrived at the airport just on time. Time enough for him to watch the casket being moved into the underbelly of the plane. For him to be told again that American Airlines was picking up the tab and that they were deeply sorry for his loss. Time enough for him to think about how, in the span of about 6 hours, his life had completely come to an end. Time enough. Mr. Wilson? I'm sorry, but for a hell of a long time, everybody that calls me Mr. Wilson has given me shitty news. Please call me Ray. Ray, I'm Maxine. I'm here to help you with anything you need on this flight. Get you something to drink? To eat? Sorry, Maxine. It's been a lousy few hours. I understand. Quite well. For the first time, Ray looked up. Tall, young, African-American, shortish hair, pretty. Not beautiful, but pretty. Small smile on her face, her eyes letting him know she gave a shit about him and how he felt. I'm sorry, you understand quite well? Yes, she hesitated. Ray, in a few days you'll be receiving a card. It will look like all the other bereavement cards you'll receive. But notice the postmark. Open it, follow the instructions. I promise you it will help you in ways you can't even comprehend right now. Please, promise me you'll open it. Her eyes filled with tears. Ray reflexively grabbed her hand. She held his as tight as she could. Just promise me. Maxine, I promise. Good. I'll look for you. What? She smiled. You'll see. You'll understand. Anything you need on board, let me know. An uneventful flight, as uneventful as taking your dead wife home can be. Again, they landed, stopped away from the terminal. Ray looked out the window, saw a Maddox limo and hearse waiting on the tarmac, and nodded. They were efficient. As he was leaving the plane, he caught Maxine's eye. Don't forget, soft smile. Thanks, I won't. The next days were a crush of phone calls, media, friends, relatives, a crush of ache, loneliness, quiet, a crush of memories. She was there, everywhere in the farmhouse. The paintings on the walls, the bright ocean colors she loved, the mismatched china she loved to entertain with, just to see the faces on the snooty fuckers who thought she should feed them porterhouse on Wedgwood rather than Walmart. Then the tree. The reason he bought the farm in the first place. He was a Northern Virginia boy, born and raised in Alexandria, lived in Springfield, worked in Herndon and Fairfax and Arlington. Knew the commercial real estate market when it was climbing and tanking. He'd made and lost and made a fortune, finally keeping it. He'd worked hard. He'd had good fortune thrust on him, and he made some stay with him. He wanted more. He wanted peace and quiet, and, as he liked to put it, a place where I can stare into space and like what I see. He searched the Gainesville, Marshall, Front Rural area for years, realizing that to find the peace he craved, he'd have to move farther from the congestion he helped create. Just before he had met Marion, he was meandering, as he liked to say, through Front Royal, when suddenly he stopped, almost getting rear-ended. The tree was huge, oak, and magnificent. If you did not believe in a creator, you would after looking at this tree. The way he'd describe it to folks visiting was, once you make the right off 66, just keep going until you see a tree on your left like the one in Forrest Gump, only cooler. Make that left and look for the lights. Marion fell in love with the tree, so much so that they'd promised each other, soon after they were married, that they'd be buried side by side underneath it. She had just turned 50. He figured she'd have to make sure that it could be done the way they'd dreamed. So he had done the research, gotten the approvals, and had put it with his important shit so she'd know where to find it. But it was Ray who had to find it, make sure all the states and towns' wishes were respected, make the calls, send the invitations, arrange for security to stop a prying press from interfering, and Ray to find a minister, a keyboard player, and a singer for the service. The singer was easy. Kim Jones had the most beautiful voice in Front Royal. She'd won local and statewide singing competitions, yet had never made the big time. She and Ray had had a fling years ago. Now she was a dear friend to both he and Marion, sang every so often at her church and occasionally at her favorite karaoke hangout. She had known and dreaded it, knowing there was no earthly way she was going to keep her composure. She felt herself a professional. She wanted to sing the best she possibly could for her friends. It arrived. On the day he and his librarian were to run away to San Diego, he was laying her under their tree. The minister was fine, although a little long-winded for Ray's taste. The hymns were there for the other mourners, about 100, including Marion's small family, grown daughter, an aunt, a couple of cousins, and his, much larger, including 2 ex-wives, several cross-country kids, a couple of aunts and uncles, and too many cousins to count. Plus, there were close friends and several people in town Ray knew Marion liked. Her hairdresser, the kid at the Circle K who rang up her morning coffee, and most everybody at the Apple House, her favorite place in Front Royal. "They're in Linden, dear," Ray would always mutter, smiling. He placed Kim and the song at the end. "Who Are You Waiting For?" written and sung originally by Melissa Etheridge. They had seen her on one of their first dates, and she had performed it playing the piano, no other instruments. About halfway through, they both noticed the other crying. No mention about it, though. It wasn't until the wedding preparation that they discussed it, why and how it had affected them, and why it had to be included in their ceremony. Both Marion and Ray were alcoholics, functioning alcoholics, able to kick ass and take names all day. Also, to go home, and instead of reaching for dinner, reaching for either Chivas Regal, her, or Jack Daniels, him. They'd seen each other at their absolute worst, loud, belligerent, mad at the world. Through the help of self-intervention, a psychiatrist, and several therapists, they were able to kick booze and stay sober the entire length of their marriage. They each credited the other with the strength, love, and confidence to keep moving forward every day. There were several people that knew the importance of that song. Kim knew. She sang beautifully. The keyboardist was magnificent. His solos seemed to dance in the air all around them. And then, on the final note, Kim broke down. It was beautiful. It was haunting. It was gut-wrenching. Everyone was sobbing, holding on to each other, shoulders heaving, a scene that would make anyone dissolve. Except one man. Ray stood, stoic. Not a tear, not a gasp, not a whimper. He had not cried since his first conversation with Detective Watson. Not even his bullet-whittled life on a morgue slab had broken him. He was emotional, all right. Very emotional. Anger. Pure, white light hatred. An anger so pure that if anyone had looked into his soul, they would have been scared for themselves and for everyone around them. He had heard from Detective Watson that the killer had been caught. A nutty motherfucker wearing just a green jacket, the crazy son of a bitch being naked underneath, who had stepped into the same fucking Waffle House his wife was leaving and stitched his fucking AR-15 bullets into her body. Yay. He felt like saying, "Well, gosh, Detective, that's great news. You caught the low-life piece of shit that destroyed Marion and my fucking life together. Want to sing at her funeral?" Instead, he thanked Watson for his kindness and complimented him on catching the accused assailant so quickly. He ranked this call with the functionary cards and letters he'd received from a host of politicians, including congressmen, senators, and his governor, and how their, quote, thoughts and prayers were with him and his family at his time of tragic loss. The reply he had wanted to send to all of them would have been the same. "Dear asshole, not only do you not give a shit about my wife and I, not only do you not give a shit that an assault weapon, an assault weapon whose sole purpose is to kill as many humans as is possible given the place and circumstances, was used to tear my wife in half, you've actually kept legislation whose purpose would have been to outlaw these fucking hand-carried death machines from coming close to passing. I ask you, on behalf of humanity, to head to the Beltway. Stop your car on the roadside. Wait for an 18-wheel monster barreling down at 75 to 80 miles an hour, and just when it gets 20 yards from you, step in front of it. I'll send your spouses a card expressing my, quote, thoughts and prayers for their loss. Ray had written that a dozen times, and always crumpled it up and threw it away. His response was no response. Not to politicians, not to media, not to relatives and friends. He answered no phone calls, sent out no thank you notes, and continued to sink deeper and deeper into his own hatred of everyone and everything. The night of the funeral, after he laid Mary and the librarian under their tree, he found himself in front of 411 South Street in Front Royal, staring at the entrance to the liquor store. He knew that no one would blame him. Everyone would understand the hell he had just gone through and would continue to go through. If anyone deserved a bender, it's old Ray, they'd say. But there was this voice, so clear he could hear it. A presence, so real he could feel it. Her sound, her smell, it filled the car. Ray, don't do it, Ray. Baby, I'm okay. I'm in a wonderful place. I will always love you. I'll always be with you. Don't do it, Ray. If you love me, don't do it. Don't do it. For me. Rap on the car window. Ray? Ray, that you? Ray jolted awake. What? Hi, Ray, it's me, Larry Peters. Played keyboard at your wife's funeral? Oh, hi, Larry. You look a little different. Yeah, my real job's a front row cop. When I got on shift 3 hours ago, you were here. Saw your head against the window just now, and well, with everything. I'm fine, officer. Larry. Just needed to get away for a while. He nodded toward the liquor store. Used to be one of my favorite haunts. Needed to be talked out of going in. You helped. It's been closed for 2 hours, Ray. I didn't do much of anything. You did a hell of a lot, especially this morning. Thanks again. It wasn't much. I was doing what I felt I had to do. Ray, is there anything else I can do? Anything I can help you with? Thanks, Larry. I'm fine. Heading back home. Drive safe. He stopped. I'm sick about what happened to your wife. We cops hate those goddamn assault weapons. Every time we get a call where one of them is involved, well, it gives you a sick feeling. I can imagine. You'd think those idiots in D.C. would listen to us and ban them. I'm sorry, Ray. I just wanted you to know how most of us feel. I appreciate everything you've done and said, Larry. Gave me something to think about. Good night. They shook hands goodnight, and Ray started back to the farm, thinking about Larry. Those idiots in D.C. would listen to us and ban him. He knew why Marion had been there, talking him out of the booze. He needed to stay clear, stay focused. He needed to think this out. He needed to congregate his thoughts into one coherent plan. A plan that would get those idiots to listen. He was back home in the kitchen, making a big pot of coffee. While the coffee was brewing, he idly flipped through the pile of mail he hadn't gone through for days. Suddenly, he froze, almost forgetting to breathe. He stared at the postmark on the relatively large card envelope. Columbine, Colorado. Maxine, the card. He almost tore it open. On the front was a photo taken in what appeared to be a heavily wooded area, on a trail, with light coming in through an opening where the path was leading. Inside, handwritten, was a note, along with a sheet of paper. The note read, Dear Ray, on behalf of everyone associated with our group, we mourn with you the loss of your wife, Marion. We all have felt the pain and suffering that you are feeling this very moment. The anger, the frustration, the emptiness, all are familiar to us. And yet yours is uniquely different than everyone's because it's yours. None of us can feel what you feel. We can only tell you that we wish you weren't feeling it. We wish we did not have to send you this card. We wish that you and Marion had been together until your lives were over in some other fashion than through a lunatic's AR-15. What we can do is mourn with you. We can talk with you. We can try as best we can to make the healing process at least a little easier. With this card is a sheet of instructions and passwords. We set up our website this way so that the general public does not participate in it. This site is only for those who have suffered a loss through a mass shooting, 4 deaths or more, since Columbine in April 1999. We hope that you will visit often and become a part of this site. If you do not want to participate, please destroy the instructions. Again, Ray, we mourn your loss. We hope we get to meet you. It was signed, your friends at www.theassaulted.com. Ray quickly read over the full page of instructions, went over to his laptop, and began. He knew a little bit about the computers, but these guys were amazing. He literally was going to be sent to 4 individual sites, obviously friends of theassaulted.com, that had nothing to do with politics, news, or opinion. One was a tattoo parlor in Maine. The final screen was blank, except for his name and password. Name was all lowercase, dashes in between. Raymond-J-Wilson. His password, Antioch 10. Welcome to the Assaulted. Antioch 10 was how the first page of the site greeted him. There was an introduction similar to his card, but more detailed. It explained that no names were to be used on the site to keep everyone's identity private. Then in parentheses, if you're here any length of time, we'll know who you are, but it's important they don't know. Then there was the site. It was huge. A detailed history of mass shootings in the United States with contributions from the assaulted. Memorials and histories for the victims, again, with pictures, videos, audios added by the members. A listing of the ways to contact congressmen and senators, governors and legislatures, along with suggestions on who to go through, normally assaulted members. A history of the firearms used in the shootings, who made or makes them, background on them, and the history of the legislation against them. Then there were articles, videos, audios, interviews of almost every topic relating to healing and moving forward from tragedy, including examples. Speaking of help, it was all there. Free FaceTime, live chat, group meetings, single therapy, all with volunteer trained psychiatrists and counselors. One of these psychiatrists, counselors / mentors would also be assigned to the last member, as every new member was called, to go over what was available to them. Plus, there was always a list of everyone online. If you recognize someone, you could live chat them just by highlighting their assaulted name and alerting them through a button push. Ray was stunned. He'd been expecting maybe a memorial type of site. Not this. This was remarkable. Not bright and cheery, but not dark and angry either. An incredibly well done site. Then he saw the live chat pop up. It's 4 a.m. Who the hell would want to talk to me at 4 a.m.? And who the hell is Navy Yard 14? I know we're not supposed to use names, he read. But hi, Ray. It's Maxine. He wrote back, Maxine? From the flight, Maxine? Okay, we gotta be good now, LOL. Yes, it's me, Navy Yard 14. Chapter 2. U.S. Naval Yard, Washington, D.C., Monday, September 16th, 2013. She hated the name Ruth. Born Ruth Maxine Timmons on June 20th, 1983, in the D.C. neighborhood you didn't want to find yourself in when the sun went down. By the time she could tell what her legal name was, she knew she didn't like it. She always called herself Maxine. She always thought it was classier and far more mature than Ruth. Ruth was an old lady's name. And Maxine it was, from preschool through college, which was an amazing journey. Maxine's mom tried and failed to be the kind of role model Maxine needed. From prostitution and drugs to petty crimes, Bunny, short for Beatrice, wouldn't stay out of trouble. What was amazing was that little Maxine became the Block's kid. And this was no ordinary block. This was the Atlantic Street, 4th Street Southeast area, one of the top 25 most dangerous neighborhoods in the nation. Hookers and pimps, dealers and junkies, mobsters and small-time crooks. No one turned his or her back on anybody in that neighborhood. But whether it was her innocence, her sparkling blue eyes, Daddy must have been a white boy, A smile that could light up any place or person, even somewhere or someone that long ago had given up giving a damn. Or her cheerful, almost buoyant personality. Everyone loved her. When Bunny was gone, which was often, the block's kid wanted for nothing. Food, milk, clothes for school, school books, rides anywhere. It was like this underbelly of society had decided they needed to feel love in their life again, and they gave it all to this African-American angel. And Maxine did not let them down. From kindergarten until her last class at Howard University, she, and her huge extended family, never saw a B or lower on any school class report she ever received. A full ride scholarship to DeMatha High School, a full ride scholarship to Howard University, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in accounting, and each time she graduated, what a party the block would throw. Everyone would drop their chosen profession, agree to a truce among any rivals or gangs, and everyone would celebrate Maxine's success. They had kept the block's kid away from everything the block offered, and that went double at her parties. No booze, no drugs, simply great food from around the city, great music by a live band, who usually performed gratis due to how their presence was requested, with everyone showing Maxine just how proud they were, just as loudly and wildly as if it had been their own success, which in a way it had been. Bunny was never there. Even if she wasn't there. Maxine had tried to bring Bunny back, but she was too far gone. So before she graduated, she had already signed to take the CPA exam that very next week. She had found the $65 application and a $110 license fee in her coat before she left the Howard graduation party, left there by one of her many aunts and uncles. She packed her relatively meager belongings. Although she could have taken advantage of the block's generosity, she never did. Another reason why everyone loved her so. She stayed with a friend while she studied for the CPA exam, passed with flying colors. Immediately, she had business cards printed through Staples. The moment she picked them up, she almost tore the top off to see the card. R. Maxine Timmons, CPA. Staring at it, she couldn't help but think of everything she had been through. Then a drop of water struck her card, jawing her back. She had been crying. Maxine could have gone anywhere. Every major accounting firm in the country wanted her for 3 great reasons. She was smart, female, and black. There was one small challenge. Maxine didn't want the pressure. She knew that if she went with a major firm, in 10 years she'd be a partner worth millions and have stress and ulcers. She wanted to find a job that would allow her to have a life that would be full, not full of stress. A life where she could give back and not just take. She decided to accept the position with a very nice starting package. She was summa cum laude CPA after all. With a firm that contracted its accountants out to various federal agencies. For the next 10 years, she worked on Capitol Hill and the FBI, the Executive Office Building, and the Treasury Department. She worked with senators, congressmen, and GS-12s just out of college. There were huge 6-month-long projects. There were small 1 or 2 week projects. It worked like a charm. She was able to travel both the United States and around the world, Paris being her favorite stop. She was able to explore her home city, savoring its many cultures and ethnicities. She loved sports and had season tickets to the Redskins, Wizards, Nationals, and Capitals, plus excellent seats for all of Howard's sports teams and any major event her alma mater held. She did all this, for the most part, alone. For the block had done too good of a job protecting her. She trusted no one. She had dated but always found something wrong. No man, or woman for that matter, at one point she thought maybe she was gay, and found out she wasn't, had ever won her heart because she never let anyone close enough to win it or hurt it. Maxine had friends. All her season tickets were a set of 2, but none of them could or would ever say they got close enough to really know her. And Maxine was happy about that. She was simply happy, period. She loved her own company. Every trip taken was by herself. She loved to wake up at a new city or country, hunt for breakfast, lunch, or dinner places, loved to play tourist, to stay as long as she wanted without someone telling her when to leave. She never had a schedule, except when her flight left home and arrived, then when her flight left and arrived back home. There were times, like her first Paris trip, that she hadn't even had a hotel. She asked the cabbie, in decent French she'd learned at Howard, where he thought the best hotels were. The cabbie dropped her off at a corner, wished her luck, and in 25 minutes she had a room with a beautiful view of the city, an outdoor cafe below, and the realization she was falling in love for the first time. Not with anyone, but with something, with Paris. She went there once a year since graduation and had just returned from another trip when she received an assignment to head to the Washington Naval Yard. Her naval assignment had her heading to 1333 Isaac Hull Avenue, Building 197. She was sent to the 4th floor to what was called the 4 West area, where there were cubicles near the atrium. This is where contractors were stationed during their assignments. Maxine would have met hundreds of coworkers during her many hours there. She always was friendly, but not close. She'd chat, but would allow no one emotionally near. She arrived at the Navy Yard about 7:30 a.m. on Monday, September 16, 2013, and headed up to 4 West. Everyone was talking about the Redskins' 38-20 loss to the Packers on Sunday. Maxine joined a group of women at the front of the cubicle area complaining about Mike Shanahan, the Redskins' head coach, their defense, and their 0-2 record. She was closest to the cubicles. It was 8:16 a.m. "They ought to fire the guy," said someone directly in front of her. As she was saying it, Maxine looked past her and saw a thin, bald black man wearing a dark blue striped golf shirt raised a sawed-off shotgun at them. Maxine screamed, "No!" The loudest explosion a human being could imagine went off no more than a few feet from them. The 4 women were literally blown a couple of feet from where they were, landing in a tangled heap. Maxine was on the bottom, and what she saw terrified her. The heads of the other 3 women were literally ripped open. To Maxine's left, a woman had just a small part of the left side of her face. To Maxine's right, a woman with the mirror image as the left. The woman in front of Maxine, the Shanahan hater, was on top of Maxine, staring blankly, rivulets of blood pouring down either side of her skull. They had all been killed instantly. Maxine pulled herself out from under them. Her head ached, her blood was on her face, and her left hand was a very painful mess. Although she was in pain, she was very conscious, aware of death all around her. However, her innate intelligence and survival skills finally honed from a childhood on the block took over. She made damn sure he had moved. She heard shots and screams on the 4th floor, then heard him progress down to the 3rd floor, more shots fired. She had her cell phone. With her good right hand, she dialed 911, reported a shooting in progress, gave the exact location where she was, and an approximate idea of where he had gone. She was told others had called. Help was on the way. Unfortunately, the nightmare continued until 9:25, when the killer was shot dead. He was hiding in the cubicle area on the 3rd floor, directly below where Maxine was. She had slowed the flow of blood so that, although feeling weak, she was responsive when police and medical personnel finally made it to the 4th floor. She was taken to George Washington University Hospital, where doctors discovered 3 shotgun pellets that had pierced her forehead, but not her skull. Her left hand would take longer to heal. 10 pellets that missed the back of one woman's skull entered and exited Maxine's hand, chipping a couple of bones, explaining the loss of blood. As she was laying in her hospital bed, doctors or nurses would visit her. "Miss Timmons, play the lottery when you get out." "Oh my God, Maxine, it could have been so much worse." Luck. Pure dumb luck. Stand 6 inches to the left or right, you and I wouldn't be talking today. She didn't feel lucky. She felt terror every time she closed her eyes. There he was. Every time she was in a room, she looked for him. She felt so incredibly scared, just sitting in her hospital bed, not being able to get out, that she tried and failed to get the hospital administration to place her bed at the far wall directly opposite the door so she could better watch what was going on. Detective Stevens, the D.C. police detective who interviewed her, tried his best to alleviate her fears. Nothing worked. Trying to help with her concerns, Stevens came back with pictures of his dead body on the 3rd floor. "He's gone, Miss Timmons. He's very gone. He can't harm you now." "No, he's not. Yes, he can." Miss Timmons, the block overtook her. She literally screamed at him like she'd never screamed at anyone before. "Every time I close my fucking eyes, he's there. Every time I enter a room, he's there. I had a motherfucking shotgun blow off 3 women's heads right in front of my ass. What the hell is the matter with you, you fucking stupid? Get the fuck out of my room. This interview is fucking done." Detective Stevens quietly left, went straight to her treating physicians and nurses, and gave them his assessment. She had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. a condition where a person is affected mentally by suffering a shocking, scary, or dangerous event. The result could be fear, stress, and helplessness, everything Maxine was experiencing. It has been associated with returning military veterans, of which the detective was one. 2 tours in Iraq had left him with memories of trucks and U.S. officers being blown to bits, Iraqi school kids with explosive backpacks detonating them in a group of GIs whose only thought had been to help children like the ones they were missing back home. He knew all about PTSD. He'd been through 5+ years of treatment. Because of Detective Stevens, Maxine underwent several tests, was diagnosed with PTSD, and while still at GW Hospital began undergoing therapy with some mild medication to help her sleep. She was kept a little while longer than necessary medically, as her treating doctors were still concerned about her. Maxine was discharged on Friday, October 4th. Having been told just what PTSD was, she was determined to find out all about it. She arrived back at her Old Town Alexandria townhouse near the Potomac River, felt fear and stress from opening her own front door and stepping inside, turned on every light and opened every door in the house. She also immediately called Executive Lock and Key Service in neighboring Delray, had them put in a deadbolt lock on the front and back doors and locks on all the windows. However, her anxiousness was not totally satiated until she called ADT Alexandria and had a full system installed, including cameras and a phone monitoring system. In the meantime, she began seeing an Alexandria therapist GW Hospital had prescribed, downloaded everything she could find about PTSD, and went to the Alexandria Public Library and took out every book in the place, checking out 10 or more at a time, usually once a week. However, if her cheating death was a turning point in her life, so was a slightly oversized card she found while digging through 3 weeks of mail she'd tossed on her very well-lit dining room table. She'd received dozens of Get Well cards. This one was different. It had a Columbine, Colorado postmark, large for a Get Well card. She didn't know anybody in Colorado. She only knew 2 things about the state. She'd had a lousy time in Aspen, and that a high school hair had been the scene of a kind of a hell she went through. It turned out she didn't know anyone in Colorado. It was people there who knew all about her. A note that made her cry, incredibly detailed instructions, and then the discovery of a site and a community that understood her, that welcomed her. She spent hours on the site, from contributing to the Naval Yard memorial page to chatting with everyone. She spoke with survivors like her, relatives and friends of people that didn't survive, witnesses affected by the horror they saw. From angry to sad, from frustrated to resigned, Maxine seemed to have the right thing to say, which surprised her. She'd been a loner, had liked it that way. Now she was commiserating, counseling, cheering up, anything she felt was needed by the person or persons. The site had a capacity for group discussion as well. At that time, her help did not go unnoticed. On Saturday morning, December 7, 2013, her phone rang. Hello? Is this Navy Yard 14? She almost dropped the phone. Her heart started pounding. Yes, who's this? A man's voice, not too old, not too young, answered. I can't tell you who I am, but I'm someone who helps run a site you're on quite a bit. You've helped many people since you signed up October 8th. He chuckled. That little bit of info is just so you know I'm who I say I am. She smiled a little, still wary. So why are you calling me? We'd like to offer you a part-time job. Now it was her turn to chuckle. What kind of job? Your site's way too technical for me, unless, of course, y'all need your taxes done. They both laughed. No, Maxine, nothing like that. This site is a labor of love. A lot of rich and powerful people have been affected by gun violence. This is their quiet way of giving back, of helping. You used my name. We're not on the site. Chuckles again. Okay, what would I do? Exactly what you're doing now, except in a more structured way. You would be one of 8 we currently have that help new assaulted members with the site and the programs available. You'd do exactly as you've been doing, but making sure that they get all their questions asked and answered so that they can take advantage of everything we offer. What if I were willing to do everything you've asked me to do for free? She could hear the smile in his voice. You would be one of 9 members who are doing that very thing. I'll take it. Great. The way you'll find new members is when you sign in and get to your main page, there will be a small circular button on the lower right with the letters NM. Click that. You'll receive complete information about the new members you've been assigned. If there's no breaking news on CNN, Your new member load will be light. Unfortunately, business can pick up very quickly. If it does, do what you can and always do only what you feel comfortable doing. I look forward to helping as much as I can. That's all we can ask for. Thanks very much, Navy Yard 14. He was gone. She tried star 69, of course, the number was blocked. She logged on to the site, saw NM, clicked it, and received her first 3 members. As 2013 turned into 2014, Maxine realized that although she enjoyed her work on the site, as a licensed CPA, she could read her bank statements, and what they were telling her was not good news. She had done well, had been able to afford a comfortable lifestyle. That changed on September 16th. For her, there was no going back to an office existence. Far too many mentally challenging memories. She would move on to another career. She was not, under any circumstances, heading back to accounting. Maxine knew she was hireable, no concerns there. What next? She decided to take one last trip to Paris to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. She'd visited many times, but now she was traveling under the cloud of PTSD and the stress and anxiety it brought. She knew the symptoms. She also was aware of the solutions, especially those that worked for her. She was deliberately late to the airport, to the screening area, to the terminal. The less people around or near her, the better. Still, she could sense those familiar feelings right up until she stepped on the plane. Then, they were gone. Completely gone. She stood at the front of the plane looking out into a sea of faces looking back at her. She felt no stress, concern, anxiety. As a matter of fact, she felt empowered, in control, completely at ease, and, strange as it seemed, in her element. While she was heading down the aisle, though not far, she could still afford first class. She was laughing. All that work, all those hours studying, and I'm going to be a flight attendant. She enjoyed Paris, though she had uneasiness in what normally had been happy, peaceful locations, museums and restaurants. Outdoor cafes were less difficult, as was walking the city. She did tend to walk with large groups rather than heading down narrow side streets in search of something new. She ate either outdoors at a table where she could observe everything around her, or in her room. And she did what she always did, immersed herself in research about her new chosen profession. She ultimately decided on American Airlines, not for any reasoning or logic that she'd uncovered, but because of all the flights she'd been on, American Airlines attendants seemed to be enjoying their job more. When she returned, she contacted American, who immediately accepted her application and enrolled her in an almost 7-week class in Dallas, Texas. She was told she would not be paid for her training. If she passed, an offer would be made at that time. Her reaction on hearing that? When I'm done with training, you'll be begging to pay me. After 7 weeks and the highest marks overall ever registered by a candidate, Maxine's statement proved correct. She was offered essentially a spot in any hub American flew in. She chose Dulles Airport near Herndon, Virginia, with the stipulation that she was never to be transferred unless she requested it. This was immediately agreed to. A new life began for Maxine, flying out of Dulles, performing at the highest level, which had always been her way, carrying her laptop, begging off hanging with her crew, spending time with the site members, both new and old, getting more emotional nourishment from a website than from human contact. Maxine was very friendly to her co-workers, but always to a point and no further. No one knew about her growing up on the block, about her Howard University tryouts, and especially not about the Naval Yard. She would help passengers on her flights, but those on her website even more. She spoke with new and old members, survivors and loved ones from places like Atlanta, Wakefield, Omaha, Carthage, Fort Hood, and Tucson, all before her shooting, shared eerily similar thoughts, stories, and fears as hers. People from Charleston, Chattanooga, San Bernardino, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, and Las Vegas told horribly similar tales. All these assaulted touched Maxine in ways hard to understand. Through their responses, it felt like she touched them too. Maxine felt like she could ease the pain of most of the assaulted members, except for one group, one heartbreaking, emotion-savaging group. They would come and tears would well up before she could connect with them. Website names would pop up like Red Lake 21, West Nickel 13, Virginia Tech 34, Santa Monica 3, Parkland 17. And the most gut-wrenching of them all, anyone with Sandy Hook in their name. It was the children, the kids, even the college students. So much to live for, their lives obliterated before they could even begin. Maxine had no children. She hardly had any family except her large adopted one. Yet these were the worst. The stories, the calls, the turning on the TV to discover the horror, the visits by police, and then would come the worst single moment, the identification. My boy, lifeless on a slab. I was so proud of her, the first in our family to make it to college, to see her like that. 6. He was 6, Navy Yard 14. 6, and nobody gives a shit. You send your kid off to school, kiss them goodbye, tell them you love them, and the next time you see them is at a morgue. She listened because she had to, needed to. Many nights she would cry herself to sleep because she felt every emotion they felt except one. She could not even begin to imagine the agony of losing a child, especially to a bullet. She continued with her own therapy, trying not only to help herself, but also to have the right words in which to help others. Always the same bottom line from every single member. Nothing has happened. No one cares. Nobody is listening. They don't want to stop gun violence. No one is responsible. They don't care about making schools safer. They've forgotten about our loss. My son, daughter, wife, husband, lover, relative doesn't matter to anyone but me. No one listens. No one cares. Maxine never knew what to say. Shortly after the Antioch shooting, there was a gathering of students at the U.S. Capitol protesting mass shootings by laying still on the Capitol lawn for 720 seconds. 1 second for every person killed since the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando, Florida. Maxine received an invitation and decided to go, to report what happened on the website and to see if this might trigger something that would get Congress to finally act. She arrived, started to head toward the several dozen students that were just about to begin the protest, and received her first shock of the day. Ray? Hi, Maxine, or should I say, no, not here anyway. What are you doing here? She regretted it the moment she said it. I'm sorry, Ray. I didn't mean it that way. It's okay. Smile. I know how you meant it. This doesn't seem like your kind of event. It's not. I talked with the kids online and said I'd be here if they invited you. Her second shock. What? Couldn't we have just chatted online? Ray had his serious face, the one from the plane. No, Max. I needed to see you. Hopefully have you meet with me afterwards. She couldn't help herself. She grinned. Max? Yeah, you've always looked like a Max to me. You okay with it? Maxine just sounds so, well, formal. Okay, Ray. Max it is. Ray put out his fist. She bumped it with hers. So, Max, after this, we'll head to Alexandria. You pick the location. Let me think about it. They took their places among the protesters. Maxine couldn't help but smile. Ray was easily the oldest person taking part. However, he also looked the most comfortable, even when he had trouble getting down, then up from the lawn. As the 720 seconds told by, Maxine looked slightly to her left and noticed Ray's face. Jaw clenched, eyes boring a hole into the sky. After the protest, Maxine suggested Hard Times Cafe on King Street in Alexandria. She loved the chili and she knew she'd need at least one cold beer to numb the sight of all those kids lying motionless out of her head. They met there, got a table in the back. As Ray had intimated, this would be a conversation that would be website related. She quickly ordered beer. Ray had Diet Pepsi. Oh, Ray, I forgot. You want me to get something else? No, that's fine. I understand the beer. It kind of got to me too, seeing all those kids lying so still. He looked at her. Okay, Ray, you got the floor. Anyone who knew Ray realized that once he had an idea, he would first try to blow holes through it, find the weaknesses, then continue to perfect it. Ray Wilson had thought about this since the night of Marion's funeral. He had drawn it up, knocked it down, redrawn it, knocked a little less down, until now he had his idea in shape. When he was in commercial real estate, that shape was extremely doable. The plan, as it would be referred to, was extremely doable. Max, what is the one theme I'm guessing everyone on the site talks to you about? What, besides the pain, the loss of going through each day without someone? He looked at her. Max, you know what I mean. That nobody cares. That whoever they're grieving for died in vain. That whatever wounds they suffered are ultimately going to be for nothing. Who is responsible for our lawmakers not giving a shit? What do you mean, who is responsible? Come on, Max. What keeps Congress from outlawing assault rifles or automatic weapons? What keeps Congress from putting stricter controls on gun shows? What keeps Congress from making tighter background checks? From a national registry? Maxine stared at Ray. She could literally feel what his response would be. The NRA, the National Rifle Association. Ray never took his eyes off hers. To make the plan succeed, he'd need Max. He'd need her help. I'm going to fill a tourist bus full of the assaulted members, roughly about 30. They will be armed with illegal AR-15s and AK-47s. We're going to pull up to NRA headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia on Wednesday, November 7th at 11 a.m. Enter through every door, head to the top 3 floors where their offices are located, and shoot our way through the building, killing every single department head, executive committee, board member, and NRA executive we can find until we get to the president's office. Then whoever of us is left is going to let go on that son of a bitch until there's nothing left but goo on his chair. He never changed expression, kept his voice low, and made sure that Max knew that this was going to become reality. Yet he knew that to make this a reality, she was going to have to say yes. Only then will the laws in this country change. They will not alter even a little bit until Mr. Mitchell's wife gets one of those nice cards from the assaulted.com. Hell, she probably won't even understand the Columbine postmark. Everyone who had a pulse in the United States knew that Mr. James Mitchell, Jim to his friends, was the president of the biggest lobby on Capitol Hill, the NRA, and the guy who could make you or break you in the political world. This is dangerous, crazy. Yes, it is. If you can tell me any other way to change the gun laws so that nobody has to go through what you and I and thousands of other assaulted members have, we'll have a nice lunch, say goodbye, and I'll see you on the internet. She looked at him. He was dead serious. She couldn't think of anything else. She thought of what a gang member had said about another gang on the block. If the big dog don't come to you, you gotta go to the big dog. If I agreed to help you, what would you need from me? Big if. Damaged goods, Max. What? Like me. Damaged goods. I need people who are as disenfranchised as I feel, who are willing to take the ultimate step toward changing the gun laws in this country. Ray, I'm not going to ask anyone to leave their Max, I don't want family people. Nobody with kids. Anyone that they must care for or about. I want people like you and me. No families to worry about. Nothing left. My life was over the minute I saw Marion in the morgue. Those are the kind of people I want. People like me. Damaged goods. Maxine knew bunches of them. She told Ray that. For over an hour with her CPA's training, she went through all the scenarios, all the what-ifs, and narrowed it down to the essentials. But Ray, here are my ground rules. You go see them. I'll make the initial introductions, but you won't meet them unless I feel they're mentally and physically ready. You will have to talk to them. You'll have to fly to them to discuss your plan. If they say no once, you're to thank them for their time and not bother them again. If they want to do this, they'll be answering to you, not me. Do you understand? Yes, Max. Soft sell only. They answer to me and you'll be the initial barometer. If you think it's no, it's no. If they say no, it's no. I'm only doing this because... She stopped, thinking of her last conversation with a Sandy Hook. Tears began rolling down her face. Eyes still set squarely on Ray. I can't. I can't. No more parents sobbing about their dead babies. What came out of her was a long, slow wail for the dead children, their parents and loved ones, and for her. Ray went to the other side, put his arm around her. As she cried for so many, Ray cried not at all.